Kia ora, good morning. We're bringing you this 3 News special after an almost unbelievable chain of events unfolded in the US in the early hours of this morning. In a series of highly coordinated and deadly terrorist attacks, 3 hijacked planes have crashed into major US landmarks, prominent symbols of America's wealth and power. 2 planes crashed into the Twin Towers of New York's World Trade Center. Both towers have been destroyed. A 3rd plane plunged into the Pentagon in Washington. It's on fire. A 4th hijacked plane has crashed in Pennsylvania. The extent of the casualties is impossible to establish at this stage, but 50,000 people, the number who live in Nelson or Whangarei, work at the World Trade Center alone.
The first explosion happened as thousands of New Yorkers were on their way to work this morning. The devastation which followed was the worst terrorist attack in history. It began when a hijacked plane crashed into one of the twin towers of the World Trade Center. 18 minutes later, a second plane collided. This was no accident. The crash was deliberate. As smoke and flames streamed from the building, people could be seen at the windows, pleading desperately for rescue. But there was no escape. The building started to collapse.
Lots of chaos. It's an unreal feeling.
In a cloud of glass and debris, the twisted remains of the first tower came crashing to earth. The Manhattan skyline was changed forever. Tons of concrete rained down from above, covering the city in a pall of smoke and glass. A little later, the second tower imploded. How many people were dead at this stage is impossible to guess, but 50,000 people worked in this building every day. The death toll could be huge. The carnage was unimaginable.
Side of the building, and there was smoke everywhere, and people are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess, because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
Some guy came out, his skin was all off. I helped him out. This is him all over. There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
I was standing next to One World Trade Center, and then all of a sudden I heard rumbling, and we all started running away from it. The glass blew out and threw me onto the sidewalk, and I couldn't see for 20 seconds. And then I started seeing vaguely the street, and I just started walking, and my eyesight came back.
I see you're bloody. You have dust all over you.
Yeah, it was bad. It was like a dust storm or something. I couldn't see anything.
How badly are you hurt?
I have no idea.
As soon as she got hit, I was thrown to a window. So I was very lucky to get out. There's a lot of people that didn't get out. There's a lot of people coming down the stairs, burnt up. It's bad.
We just come out of Tower 1. We were walking towards Broadway. They're saying, move along, move along, move along. I looked up as soon as we got across the street. I looked up, I saw the tower start to buckle. I just turned and ran, ducked down, put a jacket over my head. 3 or 4 of us huddled together, and it was just black everywhere.
Were you covered? Were you hit with debris?
No. But I mean, I was ducked behind a subway cover, so I put with the jacket over. The 3 of us, all of us huddled together. There was, dust and whatnot everywhere, but it was.
The second building has just come down. The second, everyone's being asked to get down. Come down.
Can't even look at it, because all I can see are people. I don't see a building, I see people. People hurt. Children without mothers and fathers tonight.
Emergency services tried to clear the area as thick dust covered the streets in a blanket. Meanwhile, another unbelievable scene was being played out in Washington. A 3rd plane crashed near the Pentagon, the heart of America's Defense Department. The US was thrown into more terror and confusion. All aircraft across the country were grounded. Amid threats of further terrorist activity, federal buildings, including the White House, were evacuated. President Bush was on a trip to Florida when the attacks happened. He now faces the worst crisis since the Second World War.
I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act.
Tonight, America is on alert for further attacks, while the authorities hunt for those responsible.
Well, the fourth plane to crash was a Boeing 757 operated by United Airlines. It went down near Pittsburgh in the northeast United States. United Airlines said there were 38 passengers and a crew of 7 on board. It was flying from New Jersey to San Francisco. It's not known for certain if the crash is related to the attacks in New York and Washington, D.C. Well, Radio New Zealand reporter Ray Lamb is in New York and was very close to where the terrorist attacks took place, when they took place. She's currently inside the police cordon, and a few moments ago she joined us by phone.
All right, at the moment I'm standing on a corner just a few blocks back from where the World Trade Center used to be. I basically, once I heard the news about 6 hours ago, made my way downtown as quickly as possible and managed to get through the police cordon. I was fighting my way against a human tide of just hordes and hordes of people, office workers and others who were heading uptown away from the scene. Fairly calm, although obviously things were a little more frantic as I got closer to the downtown area where you could see the smoke billowing up into the air. People were trying to get home, those of them who don't live too far away, but obviously the city is shut down completely. There's no public transport, no subways, nothing like that. So there were others who were just sitting on, one man I talked to was sitting on the church steps. He was trying to get home to New Jersey. Thought he didn't know what to do, so he was just sitting on the church steps, unable to get through to his family at home. The cell phones and the phone system, cell phones aren't working and the phone system is fairly intermittent. So, people are unable to contact family and friends to say they're all right or even to find out if others have been hurt. Extraordinary scenes. A little while ago I talked to a priest. He had been down after the first explosion, after the plane hit the first building. He went down to see what he could do. And had been amongst the dead and the dying. He was covered in soot. I mean, he was in his priest's black suit with a clerical collar, and it wasn't black. It was just this horrible, dirty grey. And he said it was just like, it was worse, he thought, than scenes in Hiroshima after the bomb. He said there's just rubble and iron and bodies everywhere. Now, he was very distressed. He had got down there after the first explosion. It was in time for the second one. As the fires were burning, he had actually seen people. He thought they were jumping off the buildings. They were so desperate and obviously hitting the streets. He'd been into a church down there. One of the first casualties that he was aware of was, in fact, another priest, the fire service chaplain. The body had been brought to one of the churches that's still standing, not too far from where the towers were, and apparently also a senior fire officer's body was there as well, and the floor of the church, he said, was covered in blood. So very distressing scenes. I've just been talking to a chap standing on the corner just near here, great big burly chap, not the sort of guy I'd usually approach in the streets of Manhattan, and he was weeping. He was a janitor from one of the buildings. He had been there, just about a block back from where it happened. He'd felt the ground rumbling, thought it was an earthquake, rushed outside and could hardly see, a foot or two in front of his face from the debris. He says his brother normally works at the World Trade Center, but fortunately is on a day off today. But he said he's just so distressed because he's grown up around here. He's lived all his life with these buildings. And he said he just, takes it personally. And he said he really hopes that they will, put the buildings back up again just so that whoever is responsible for this, and obviously information down here on the streets is a bit few and far between, but he says obviously he wants the buildings rebuilt so that whoever did it doesn't win.
Radio New Zealand's Ray Lamb speaking from inside the police cordon in New York. Here in New Zealand, Auckland International Airport is in turmoil this morning as news of what's happened sinks in. Distressed passengers, especially Americans arriving in the country, are in shock, of course. One pilot told 3 News the terrorists would have killed the pilots of the hijacked planes and flown the aircraft themselves. He says pilots would refuse to do anything that would endanger lives, even under threat of death.
Bewildered and distressed, passengers and others at Auckland International Airport, especially Americans arriving off a Los Angeles flight, were still struggling to come to grips with the terrorist attacks.
Particularly you worry about all the families who've lost something. And you think about, there's so many innocent people and children. And I've just come back from London via LA. And it could have been, you don't lock down crying, anything that what those families are feeling, but it could have been me. And I've just come back to London with a girl and I just feel so sorry for it. It's horrific.
Did you hear about it on the flight?
We had no idea. No, we didn't hear anything.
I'm shocked, especially getting off a plane to have this kind of thing happen on it.
I mean, it's terrifying that someone can actually get on a plane and do something like this.
Yes. That's right. Yes.
And Air New Zealand pilot Brendan Leddy told 3 News all pilots around the world would also be in shock.
Horrified. I'm getting horrified.
How do you think terrorists could actually force a pilot to fly into a building?
Well, we suspect that they probably killed the crew.
Would a pilot
probably not
be able to do that? I wouldn't think so.
I don't think he'd want to. I mean, he would. He'd have to be killed before they go in, I'd imagine. And there's no reason why they couldn't take over and fly the aeroplane, for example.
Would it be hard for terrorists to learn to fly a large airliner?
No. Oh, no, the principles are the same between a big aeroplane and a small aeroplane. And I guess there's enough information available around Boeing manuals and the internet to allow them to learn how to do that. So I think security is going to go up unbelievable from now on.
Sure.
Even here.
Are you shocked that they were able to do 4 simultaneous attacks and breach security in such a major way?
No, not really. Not when you think about how large America is. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of airports at any particular time, you know, with thousands of people moving through. I don't know how they did it, but obviously it's an area that needs to be looked at.
Well, America has shut all its airports as it seeks to control the situation. Airlines around the world are having to cancel and divert flights. An Air New Zealand flight on its way to LA was refused permission to land and is now on its way back to New Zealand. For the latest on the disruptions to air travel, we cross now to our reporter Sarah Bradley, who's at Auckland Airport. Morning, Sarah.
Good morning, John. Well, absolute shock and devastation on the faces of passengers who just arrived on a United Airlines flight from Los Angeles. Of course, they weren't told about the attack during the flight, but when they landed at Auckland Airport, police officers got on the plane and told them what happened, and there were a lot of tears as they got off. In terms of departures from Auckland Airport, we're told that no flights have been cancelled yet. The next flight scheduled for the United States is at 12 noon, but it's very unlikely that will leave. I'm sure it will be cancelled. Also, we were told at the departure lounge that a lot of people are coming in and cancelling their flights today anywhere around the world and saying they just don't want to fly.
Sarah, what's security like at the airport this morning?
Oh, it's much higher than usual. There are a lot of police officers around. There's a lot of people. We were very much monitored as we went into the airport. They're protecting passengers. They're escorting a lot of passengers away, particularly when they are very upset. So security is much higher at the airport today.
Sarah, prior to working at TV3, you were a reporter in New York. Are you familiar with the World Trade Center?
Yes, I'm very familiar with the World Trade Center. I only got back from New York about 6 months ago, having lived there for 10 years. For the last 4 years, I worked next to the World Trade Center and the World Financial Center, and I used to walk under the World Trade Center concourse every day. And, this is very personal for me, of course. There was always a fear that the World Trade Center would be the subject of a terrorist attack. Particularly since the attacks in Nigeria. Of course, the World Trade Center was bombed in 1993, and there was always that fear that it would be the target. And it's just absolutely devastating to see what has happened. It's just unbelievable. I mean, who could ever have foreseen 2 aeroplanes flying into the World Trade Center?
Sarah, why the security concerns? What's in that building that makes it such a target?
Well, I mean, it's basically the world financial capital. All the big finance firms are in those 2 buildings and in the financial center next door. Security is very, very high in the World Trade Center to actually get up there. Every time you actually want to go into the World Trade Center, you have to get a photo ID done, a separate photo ID and a check. It's very, very difficult to get into the World Trade Center. And of course, the center of it's the financial capital of the world, basically.
Sarah Bradley from Auckland Airport. Thanks very much indeed, Sarah. Well, at this stage, there are no reports of any New Zealanders injured or killed in the attacks, but given the enormity of the events, it would seem almost inevitable that some New Zealanders are involved. We're joined now by Foreign Affairs Minister Phil Goff. Good morning, Minister.
Yes, good morning, John, but not a good morning for the world or for humanity.
No, it's not at all. What can people do if they're worried about New Zealanders in the US?
We're trying to do what we can to find out whether there are any New Zealanders in the area. If you take into account that there were probably at least 50,000 people working in the World Trade Center, you would have to say there's a fair possibility that amongst those victims will be some New Zealanders. We've checked the airline schedules. We've been unable to identify any New Zealand passenger on the airlines so far, but we are double checking that. It'll be some time before we get information through from New York, given the chaos, given the pandemonium that exists there. We will be setting up a consulate contact number in Auckland. That number will be advertised, but I'd stress that at this point there is no information specific to New Zealanders that we can report. As soon as we have that information, we'll be setting up the phone line to try to give reassurance to New Zealanders with friends and relations in New York.
Minister, what happens when something like this takes place? When did you hear about it? What time was your phone call?
I was rung just before 2 o'clock this morning, and we've been operating out of the beehive since between 3 and 4 this morning. I guess my reaction was the same as everybody's, absolute shock, disbelief that it could happen. We have, through the Acting Prime Minister Jim Anderton, sent a message of condolences to President Bush and through him to the American people. I've been in touch with the charge at the American Embassy a couple of times this morning. New Zealand clearly will do whatever it can in practicable terms to help the people of the United States at this time of huge tragedy for them. But really, it will be the follow-up that will count. I mean, I think that the appalling inhumanity of this act will mobilise the international community. When even the foreign minister of the Taliban expresses his opposition to what has happened, we should have a unanimity of world opinion that will enable us to eliminate the people that are behind this. We, of course, don't know who they are at the moment, but the degree of organisation, I mean, the huge organisation, the funding that would have been involved in allowing this mass hijacking and act of terror to happen has to point to an organisation such as that of Osama bin Laden.
Minister, of course, it's a natural inclination to want to respond and to want to track down who's done it, but is there perhaps some possibility we may jump the gun? Is it dangerous to speculate, do you think, at this stage?
Well, we have no clear information at the moment, other than that the circumstances of this act of terror means that it wasn't an individual act of a madman or even a small organisation. This was a very well-organised group, a very well-planned exercise to get by the security at airports, to have people on those planes that could fly it with enough accuracy to hit the buildings, to target the buildings the way that they did. It won't remain a secret for too long as to who was behind this, and there must be a coordinated international effort to do whatever we can to crack down on this form of terrorism that makes people anywhere in the world vulnerable to the actions of people that have no humanity at all.
Foreign Affairs Minister Phil Goff, thanks very much indeed for joining us, Minister. Thank you. Phil Goff, live from Parliament. Right, well, as Phil Goff said, no one's claimed responsibility for the attacks, but already the PLO and Afghanistan's Taliban have expressed shock and said it wasn't them.
Joy in Jerusalem today. In a traditional gesture of celebration, demonstrators throw free sweets to children as news of the terror attacks in the United States comes through. Many Palestinians accuse America of siding with Israel as tensions in the Middle East grow. And this is what they're celebrating: the collapse of the World Trade Center in New York, hit by 2 hijacked planes. The building has been a focus of terrorists before. Back in February 1993, it was the scene of a massive bomb blast which killed 6 people. Osama bin Laden is the man linked to that bombing, and he's high on the list of suspects for today's attacks. He's the most wanted terrorist in the world, a man who's pledged himself to conducting a bloody war against America. Just last year, he was linked to the suicide bomb attack against the USS Cole, an American warship in the Yemen port of Aden. 17 sailors died. And in August 1998, American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania were bombed, killing 224 people. Reports earlier this summer suggested that a terror campaign against American and Israeli targets was imminent.
There are many people in the Middle East, including very radical groups, that are bitterly opposed to what they see as the United States dominance of the Persian Gulf. They see the Fifth Fleet there, they see the Air Force units, they see the way the United States attacks Iraq repeatedly. From the US perception, it is an absolute rogue state, but from the perception in the Middle East, it is the United States interfering in the region, and people are not prepared to accept that.
Bin Laden isn't the only suspect. Libya's Colonel Gaddafi, whose agents were charged with the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 that exploded over Lockerbie, is also on the suspect list, as is Saddam Hussein, the leader of Iraq, whose airspace is still being policed by US jets. Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat spoke today of his disbelief at the US attacks.
First of all, I am offering my condolences, the condolences of the Palestinian people to the American President, President Bush, to his government, to the American people for this terrible act. We are completely shocked, unbelievable.
Until today, this was the worst act of terrorism on US soil. The bombing in 1995 of the federal building in Oklahoma. 168 people were killed. Middle East extremists were also suspected, but it was a former US soldier, Timothy McVeigh, who was responsible. The hunt is on for the people behind today's terror campaign. The FBI, the CIA and US national security experts are throwing all their resources into bringing those responsible to justice.
It's just repeating that no one has claimed responsibility for the attacks. Well, staff at the US Embassy in Wellington are bracing themselves for a terrible day. They expect to be flooded with inquiries from Americans in this country. Our reporter Tony Field has been at the embassy.
There's a heightened security presence outside the US Embassy in Wellington this morning. Police were posted here about 5 a.m. There's also additional security guards inside the gated complex. Inside, the staff are making no official comment at this moment, given the nature of the incidents. However, they say they echo the comments of US President George Bush. Now, the ambassador who was due to arrive next month, Charles Swindells, he replaced the previous ambassador, Carol Moseley-Braun. It's not known if he will come out to New Zealand any earlier because of this incident. At the moment, staff say only that he is set to arrive sometime next month. Now, very few staff have come in or out of the embassy in the last couple of hours. Those who've walked into the embassy looked very grim-faced, and I can tell you that one TV3 staff member who was dropped off here by a taxi driver, that taxi driver was in tears.
Tony Field from Wellington. Now, I'm just getting news in my earpiece that Air New Zealand says one of its planes was hijacked. We're not sure whether it's an Air New Zealand plane or, in fact, a code-share. We all know that sometimes you book Air New Zealand and you get on another airline. It seems to have been a code-share plane with United, but one of its planes was hijacked. We don't think it's come to any grief. We will give you more information the moment that comes to hand. I'm hoping to receive some as we're still here. But an Air New Zealand code-share plane with United Airlines. I'm speculating it was probably a United Airlines plane, but it would have had Air New Zealand passengers on it. Was part of the drama. The moment we get more on that. No ticketed passengers on the flight, apparently, which means it may have just had crew on and no passengers at all, I've just been told in my earpiece. So a code-share plane. But the prognosis is good. The plane is safe, apparently, and no one has been hurt. Right. That brings this 3 News special to an end, but stay with TV3. Normal programming is being replaced with coverage of the terrorist attacks from the ABC in America, and we'll update with local reaction from throughout the day. We'll also be back at 6.